All right, thank you very much. So today we are going to be talking about how to workshop your workshop, all very meta, right? How do we put together a 1-hour workshop for a peer educator? Of course, this is going to be awesome for everybody. These are the lessons around lesson planning. So it doesn't matter if you are a peer mentor, an SI, a tutor, a faculty member, or staff member. This is going to be a great structure for any lesson planning. We've specifically catered it to peer educators just because this is the purpose of this series, but it's very much the principles and practices of all lesson planning. So just again, by way of introduction, my name is Crystal. I am the coordinator for the California Community Colleges Success Network, or 3CSN. 3CSN is the amazing nonprofit organization run through the Chancellor's Office that brings all of these cool events across California to bring people all over the United States to get together to talk about teaching and learning and creating powerful student-centered environments. And on Thursday, we take over the airwaves and we talk about peer education. So I'm also the director of the Center for Academic Success at Pierce College in Los Angeles. We also have Cameron, Lindsay Ann, and Lindsay Lazo not feeling so well today. So I will be playing the part of Lindsay Lazo today. So today we're going to talk about the 5 parts of a lesson plan. We're going to have you create as you go. So you're actually going to be working in a handout and you're going to be kind of building your own workshop as we go. And then we're going to do a little peer review of our very sloppy put together lesson plans. If you have to leave at 4 p.m., that's fine. If you want to stay until 4:30, we are going to go over what a lesson plan looks like in a detailed fashion. We're going to go over something we call internal agendas. And we'll make some internal agendas for ourselves. So just keep in mind that we are very heavy in audience participation. So make sure you know where that chat is, ask your questions. And I see some people, some veterans are already messaging me. I appreciate that. Use that reaction button to raise your hand or give us a heart. I like hearts, they make me feel good. It's been a long day for all of us. So hearts, happy faces. Thank you, Lindsay. Yeah, keep them coming. Thank you, Alina. Just share the love in any way that you see fits. We're actually going to create a lesson plan. And we're actually going to show them to somebody else today, right? So just be ready to do some really sloppy prototyping and be ready to show somebody something that you may not be fully formed yourself yet. That's okay. It's all about the process. We're going to send you some links in the chat, 2 links to be exact. So we'll try to keep those straight for you. Just a couple of community agreements before we get started so we can prepare our brains for the tasks ahead of us. Do follow along. There will be a handout and a collaborative document, and we'll link those in the chat. Do your best to be present. Turn your cameras on if you can. It really helps build that community. And again, use those emojis, type in the chat, and participate in breakouts, whatever way works for you. If you can't be in a breakout, I know a couple of you have let me know already, that's fine. But if you can't be in a breakout today, message Cameron. But again, if you already told me, I'll tell Cameron because Lindsay L is not here today. So just let Cameron know if you're unable to go into a breakout room today. And last, just remember, we're all tired. I'm tired. It's been a long day, a long semester. Let's keep the energy and the positivity and the kindness going amongst ourselves. And thank you for the heart. I appreciate it, Laura. So with that, let's dig in. Let's do some lesson planning. Let's look at you facilitating a workshop. Cameron, take it away.
Thank you, Crystal. So let's now talk about facilitating workshops. We're going to be discussing lesson planning today. Next slide, please. All right. Okay, now we're going to start with a warm-up activity. An example of a warm-up activity can be a KWL chart. Give me 1 second. I am posting in the chat below a link to our KWL chart. I think I accidentally sent it directly to everyone. All right, there we go. All right. Okay. All right. Okay. So now if you look at the KWL chart, you're going to see that there are 3 columns, K, W, and L. What the K stands for is for what you already know. W stands for what you want to know. Oh, I'm sorry. I kind of jumped the gun here. The KWL chart, its purpose is to track is to be able to track what you're doing from the beginning of the session to the end of your workshop / peer mentoring tutoring session. Now, when we look at the KWL chart, there are examples of what we could write for what we know or what we want to know. An example can be that, give me 1 second, can be that I know that I should have learning objectives, so you know where you're going. Or what you might want to know is, what is a good learning objective? So we're going to give you about 2 minutes to think, write, and type about what you know and what you want to know from today's workshop. Or, yeah.
All right, so 2 minutes. I'm starting the timer. Any questions on the task? All right, take it away. If you have questions, put them in the chat or raise your hand. All right, there's some awesome responses there. Cameron, you are muted as soon as you're unmuted.
I just realized that. I just was like, all right, everybody, let's start. Yeah, no, I just realized that. Okay, let's look at what people have written down. Learning objectives provide students a framework to prepare for lessons. That is a great thing. Every learning objective should have a method attached to it that is clear and easy to follow. These are some really great ones, everybody. You're doing really amazing. And let's go to the what I want to know. How detailed do learning objectives need to be? How to make a lesson plan clear to others? How to be efficient? These are all really great, what you know and what you would like to know. Yeah, they're all really well focused.
So it looks great. Thanks, everybody. I see a lot on those learning objectives and directed learning activities. So this is going to be great. We're going to try to answer some of those questions and talk about them in the breakouts as well. So what we're going to do next is we're going to go over the 5 parts of a lesson plan. We're going to talk about how to write a topic, how to write those objectives. It's a good thing because a lot of people have questions on that. Lindsay's ready to go. What a good opening might look like, how you do your main body, and how you would do a closing. And you see there's some times suggested here. Pay special attention to that main body. We're going to come back to that. You'll notice that sometimes your main ideas are really just 25 minutes. It could be as little as half of your workshop. So we'll come back to that in a moment. And again, we are going to actually have you write examples of topics, objectives, openings, main bodies, and closings as we go. And so in order to do that, we're going to put one more link in the chat, and that is to a lesson planning handout. The lesson planning handout looks like, there it is, looks like this. So you can go there. If you're going to use this by yourself, if you're going to just make sure you download it first. If you can't access the document and the link, let us know. We'll put a link in the chat. But if, again, we put the link in the chat, make sure you download it before you write in it. Otherwise, you'll write on everybody else's. Does everybody have it now, or does anybody need some help getting that lesson plan handout? Okay, so if you do need help getting that lesson planning handout, let us know. We're very, very happy to send you that link, or I can even email it to you. So feel free to let me know in the chat if you need some help getting that handout. Otherwise, with it by your side, let's dig into how this stuff works. Cameron, take it away.
I'm really great at not realizing I'm muted. All right, let's talk about a topic. A topic is what you realistically can go through within an hour. So you have to be aware of overly broad topics like online learning, logic, and rocks. These are very big, very nebulous concepts that could be anything, and it's not possible to cover them all. They're just too broad of a topic, and you can't cover them in an hour. Next slide. All right, so here are examples of an actually more specific topic, one that's more direct, using Canvas discussions for group study sessions, top 10 logical fallacies in presidential debates, how geodes are formed. All right, so as we said, we'd like you to turn back to your handout. So we're going to give you, there are more detailed specific plans. So let's turn our handout in the document type sorry.
Here, Cameron,
right.
I got you. Don't worry.
No, I got it. So we're going to actually want you to work on an imaginary lesson plan within your document. We're going to give you 2 minutes to think, write, or type about your ideas for a topic for this imaginary lesson.
All right, thanks, Cameron. So go back into that handout that you downloaded and you can see it here on the screen. What we're gonna have you do is just check out some of the examples of topics, note-taking, introduction to a T1 calculator, a thesis statement, verb tenses, maybe historical timelines, whatever it is. What can you get through in an hour? What's an example of a topic that you can cover in 1 hour? So I'm gonna set my timer for just 1 minute. Just kind of think of one topic. You can put it in your handout if you want to keep it to yourself, or you can put it in the chat if you want to share it with us. Any questions on the task before we go? Compassion fatigue, how to mitigate burnout. Beautiful, Jacqueline. I love that. So good. And you see how it's contained, it's small enough. If Jacqueline tried to do something like exhaustion, right? Like that's like a big topic, but specifically compassion fatigue and mitigating burnout, very specific, very narrow. Excellent, wonderful. Thank you for sharing. So, we got what is gerrymandering? Very nice, very specific, good stuff. Any questions about how to do topics? Okay, in that case, we're going to move on. The next part for your lesson planning is the objective. And this is the one that people have lots of questions about. So Lindsay, take it away.
All right, so now we're going to talk about objectives. So what are objectives in the context of learning plan? So let's see some of these examples. So they're going to be 2 to 3 measurable things that participants will be able to do at the end of your session. So looking at the examples here on the slide, so feel more comfortable with online learning, knowing all the logical fallacies, understanding how geodes are formed. So on the surface, these look good, but how do we measure these? We can't really measure feelings or understanding or knowing. They're great starting points, but we want to show more evidence. So what we need are more visual action verbs. This is how we know that students can do something because they are actions that we can see. And so to help us understand and find examples of these visual action verbs, we're going to use Bloom's taxonomy, which is on the next slide. So here we see a pyramid, and on the left side of this pyramid shows types of goals that we want our students to achieve. We want them to remember, understand, apply, analyze, evaluate, and create the topics that we talk about. But again, these things aren't measurable on their own. Now, if we look at the words in the boxes on the right, these are measurable ways to show that students have reached this goal. So I'm going to share an example of how I can visually show you how I learned Bloom's taxonomy for this presentation that we're doing right now. So when Crystal, the team, and I were prepping, I started off with the remember. To present Bloom's taxonomy, I have to remember what it is. But how would someone know that I remember what it is? It's a great goal, but again, it's not measurable. So if we look at the right box, one of the ways I can show that is by defining what Bloom's taxonomy is. So I went and defined it, and now I go up to and look at the understanding. How does one know that I understand Bloom's taxonomy? So that it has, I can classify the different types of sections of Bloom's taxonomy, so that it has remember, understand, apply, analyze, and so forth and so on. And another way would be if I can describe what each of these sections mean, the way that I'm doing right now. So for apply, how does someone know that I can apply? Well, I need to be able to use this information in new situations. So I would do that I would demonstrate this by using it in an example like the one I'm doing right now. For analyze, I can relate Bloom's taxonomy to something. For this presentation, I'm presenting Bloom's taxonomy based on how I'm relating it to my own learning process of how I'm making this presentation. And then for evaluate, I didn't really use it in my process, but if I were to show how to evaluate, I could critique it and compare it to different learning models. And so at the top here is the create. I developed this explanation and process of my experience going through creating these words in the presentation for the slide. So that's a whole breathful. One thing to note though, is that a student doesn't necessarily have to go up through this pyramid. It was created that way, but you don't have to follow one step after another to reach that create. So for example, When we came up with the prep for the slide, Crystal spent like about 10 minutes helping me by explaining the concepts so that I could understand how to explain it myself. And then I created my example after taking all that information in. So notice how I didn't go through all the different categories in this pyramid. Another thing to note about the pyramid is that at the bottom of it, it's kind of like the building blocks, it's foundations, right? And as we go up, we get more abstract, and it develops in more of a expert level of understanding. And so these categories are all different types of learning, and we may move back and forth through them as we go, through our content. And while your workshop may not cover all of these, we may only get to one or two. So when coming up with your workshop, it's important to just pick the one or two areas that you want to focus in on having your students understand more in. And it's on page 1 of your handout.
All right, so we're going to get that handout out now. So here it is, and you'll see on your handout under objectives, there's Bloom's taxonomy right there for you, so you can check it out. What we'd like to do is just give you a minute to silently reflect and just think of, in that topic that you came up with, what is one thing that you want the students to be able to do? Try to pick a verb from over here somewhere. Do you want them to differentiate between concepts? Do you want them to duplicate a list? Identify the parts of something? What do you want them to do? Just come up with one thing that you want them to do at the end of your session. And I'll set my timer for a silent minute, and then we'll share some in the chat. Does anybody have any questions? All right, I'm setting my timer. Go ahead and come up with an objective. All right, it's been about a minute. Can somebody share an objective in the chat? So here are you had some examples on your handout. Maybe students will upload a picture on Canvas, or they'll identify 3 logical fallacies used in a presidential debate, or they'll repeat the stages of geode formation by memory to a partner. What did you come up with? Tell us one objective that you came up with. Just go ahead and put it in the chat whenever you're ready. Very cool. We've got a couple coming through. We have students will identify the difference between packing and cracking. I have no idea what that means, but my curiosity is definitely piqued. We've categorized different functions and types of something. Outstanding. That's really great. They will learn to implement. Ooh, implement's a great verb. Fixes for a variety of sentence level errors. Joshua's going to have them identify scenarios that would benefit from optimized programming. Beautiful. I love that all of these start with that beautiful action verb that we saw in Bloom's taxonomy. That's going to be the key, is to be thinking about, it's not enough to say I understand it. How are you going to get students to prove that they understand it, right? So really, really well done. Thank you so much. Ooh, implement self-care strategies. Fantastic. Wonderful. All right, keep them coming. We're going to move on a little bit now that we know the topic of our session, and we know at least one thing that we want our students to get out of this session. Let's dig into the actual curriculum. But you notice that we started with the end in mind. I started with where I want my students to go to, and now I'm going to plan to that, right? That backwards planning is really important. You always want to start with the objectives before you start planning your activities. Now that we know our objectives, let's start thinking about the 3 parts of the actual activities, right? First one is the opening. Please don't just run right in and start on content, right? Just like when you exercise, you have to do some stretching first. You got to maybe walk around. But when you go into a classroom or in a workshop, you need to spend a little bit of time on your warm-up. Really, really key for us. So the warm-up is important to prime the brain for new learning. It's also super important to express safety, trust, and community, which is also absolutely vital for learning. You might maybe set some norms or expectations, or let the student know how the session or the workshop is going to work, like we did here. And you may start off with a quick activity, again, like we did here. You can use the KWL. Feel free to steal ours and modify it as you see fit. Maybe you want to do a think, pair, share. Maybe you want to just start off with some easy questions, maybe a question of the day, like if your favorite kitchen appliance, right? We had somebody came in and did a session on question of the day, and the question of the day there was, what is your pet peeve? Just start by getting people to connect and think. Maybe it's an online activity like Kahoot, a Mentimeter, or a Zoom poll, all of which can be free if you've got smaller crowds. Zoom poll obviously will be available to you within Zoom, and Kahoot and Mentimeter are available outside. It's really important to start with what they know. Don't start with the hard questions. Start with something maybe that they personally already do or know, or easy questions that maybe reinforce the fundamental knowledge of the subject. So here's some examples. Maybe students will share with a partner all of the current technology tools that they use to study, right? I already know what I do. So again, I'll be able to answer that question. I'm not going to start with anything hard. Or maybe you want to start with the group setting some norms for how the workshop will conduct the conversation about the presidential debates, right? Those can get kind of hairy. So maybe we want to start by setting some norms for behaviors. Or maybe we use the KWL. So we start with the K and the W to help students surface what they already know about geodes. All right. So with those examples in mind, I'm going to invite you to, again, go back to that handout. I'm going to scroll down a little bit. You're going to go down to number 3, which is opening. 5 to 10 minutes, nothing crazy. How are you going to start your session? Are you going to do an icebreaker, questions and activities to explore what they already know, set some norms and expectations, a think, pair, share, maybe a review of the last session, maybe generate some hopes and dreams for the session together, quick writes? What do you want to do? I'm going to give you a minute of silent reflection just to kind of think about one thing that you can do to open your session, and then we'll get some in the chat. All right, any questions? All right, take it away. All right, I see Jacqueline's ready to go. So Jacqueline's going to do an icebreaker. Do you think Jack and Rose both could have fit on the door at the end of the Titanic? Great question of the day. Maybe an opening discussion. What are the kinds of occupations or roles that someone might experience compassion fatigue? Teaching, for example, tutoring. Wonderful. All right, Jacqueline. Joshua was a little concerned that a fight's going to break out with that one. Excellent. Other opening activities that folks would like to share in the chat? We'd love to see some. Ooh, very nice. Laura wants to start with an anonymous check-in with Padlet or Zoom, right? Maybe emoji faces, maybe just clearing the air about how learning and grammatical errors we're making tend to make people feel like crap. Maybe it shouldn't, right? moving the tone from humiliating and frustrating to powering and encouraged. Just beautiful. I like the way that these opening activities that we've seen here maybe get people giggling, maybe get people talking about stuff they already know, and maybe surface some of the socio-emotional stuff that's part of learning that sometimes gets in the way. The anxiety, the affective filters, the fear. It's a great place to address that, both by explicitly addressing it, by doing what Laura says here and just talking about it, and also just by implicitly addressing it by just building community. A feelings thermometer. Okay. All right. We need a link to that, please. Wonderful. Okay, so we've got a couple of icebreakers. Keep them going, and I want to link to a feelings thermometer as soon as somebody finds it. While you are thinking about that, let's move on to our main body. So if you have, and this is assuming a 60-minute workshop, of course, you sometimes have longer ones, but assuming a 60-minute workshop, you're only going to spend about 25 to maybe 40 minutes creating new ideas, introducing the actual content that you're wanting to get to. People like me often stuff too much in there, right? We want to get through all the things and we have 30 minutes, and we have 60 minutes to do it. And so 59 of those minutes is going to be content. No, stop it, back off. You want to make sure that you create plenty of time for activities, reflection, and so on. So really think about maybe 30 to 40 minutes for your main content. And the main content is going to do things, it's going to all be things that you already know. Maybe you're going to do a reading with a golden line discussion, have people read and discuss it. Maybe you're going to play a game. If you're going to do lecture's fine. But remember that lecture really loses people very quickly. So if you're talking for more than 15 minutes, I promise you nobody's listening to you anymore. So you want to stop and do something else other than lecture if you are going to be doing a lot of lecture-based stuff.
Kristen, before you keep going, can you share your screen, please?
Oh, am I not sharing my screen? Thank you so much. And this is like the bane of my existence. I appreciate you. So when you're ready to do your main content, you really want to get to know your free online options. Look for the Mentimeters, look for the virtual whiteboard options, OneNote, Quizlet, TED Ed Talks is a great resource for videos that you may want to show. Jamboards, free and easy. And anything in that Google suite is a great way to get people engaged in those activities in your main session. So what we're going to do next, as you can imagine, oh my goodness, that was predictable. We're going to do our own, but first we're going to look at some examples. So here's a couple of examples of main body activities. Maybe for that one about online learning, maybe you want to watch a short video on how to use a discussion board and then pair up and try it, right? Or for that workshop that we're imagining on logical fallacies, maybe we're going to break into small breakout groups into Zoom, and each member gets one fallacy, and they have 5 minutes to watch a presidential debate and find their fallacy, and then share it with the group, right? Or maybe on that geode workshop that we're working on, maybe we're going to read a short excerpt from the chapter in the textbook, and then group up and generate a question about the textbook content that we read. Right? Or maybe we're going to get a Google Doc together and list all of our questions together and make our own study guide. There's lots of fun and interesting and active things that you can do in a session like this. And again, this can be interspersed with 15-minute bursts of lecture, but you really don't want to have the whole thing be lecture-based without breaks. So speaking of breaks, let's scroll down a little bit further on our handout, and you see some more activities, games, videos, collaborative documents, lectures. What I'd like you to do is take a minute just to think of one way that you're going to get your main idea across in your session. Again, I'll give you a minute to silently reflect, and then we'll read some responses in the chat. Any questions? All right, reflect away, and I'm looking forward to the feelings thermometer. We have Cameron, who's going to show a short video about gerrymandering from last week tonight. So just take it right off of the show. Great. What else? All right, we got small breakout rooms, right? So getting folks together in breakout rooms and talking about something. Great, wonderful. So we have videos, we have breakout rooms. Keep them coming. Let me know what it is that you're going to do in that main session. Just one activity. Anybody going to do lecture? Tell me you're going to do a little bit of lecture, maybe 5 minutes. Yeah, a little bit of Google Slides, a little bit of lecture, just like we're doing here, right? Wonderful. Thank you. So keep those coming. We're going to talk a little bit about our closing. So you've done all of that good stuff. You've showed your videos, you've done your breakout rooms, you've done your Google Slides, you've done your lecture. Now you want to spend just 5 minutes, maybe even a lot of minutes, but certainly no fewer than 5, on a reflection, a final assessment, maybe share what you've created together, maybe review, maybe next steps. And we would do this using, again, a lot of the same activities that we already know. Maybe you have people put in the chat one thing that they learned, Or maybe you have people fill out a KWL, which you will in a moment. So here's some examples. Maybe for that workshop on online learning, you're going to list other resources they can use to learn about discussion boards. So another activity for later. In that workshop on logical fallacies, maybe you get a Google Doc together and everyone types in one thing that they learned and one question that they have. Or in that workshop on geodes, maybe they're going to go back and fill out that L in the KWL, just like you will in just a few minutes. So with no further ado, I'm going to have you pull up that lesson plan activity one last time. Oops. Wrong. Okay. I'm going to go down and just tell me, what are you going to do to close out your workshop? Is it going to be a quick assessment, a quiz? Is it going to be a quick review of everything you went over? Is it going to be talking about next steps? Or are you going to have them submit something? Or are you going to introduce the next session? What are you going to do to close it out? So just take a minute to think about that, and then we'll share some in the chat. All right, so we have a couple already. Laura says that they're going to review key information and have some Q&A. Great, very cool on the practical session. Maybe bring in their own stuff, yeah, and really dig into it and work it and make it applicable. Jacqueline's going to do some action items, make a self-care plan, right? We call them micro commitments. Beautiful. Cameron's going to have some students write on a Google Doc. Beautiful. And Miriam is going to do a self-reflective assessment. Oh, anonymously. Very, very nice. Good stuff. So those are your basic parts of a lesson plan. And so far, you've just done this in a vacuum. You've kind of done it to yourself and shared some in the chat. Next, we are going to share it with each other. So take it away, Lindsay. Tell us what to do. Oh, and I'm going to share my screen again. Thank you.
All right, so now we're going to put you into breakout groups of 2 to 3. In that group, you'll have time to introduce yourself. So put your name, your pronouns, your college role, and what your sample lesson plan is. And then please share your ideas, discuss, exchange, and refine your answers as you go along in the conversation.
All right.
We will give you 8 minutes to do that.
Cool, so we'll pull you back in 8 minutes. I know it's not a whole lot, but we can have more time to discuss when we get back. Any questions before we go to the breakouts? Okay, Cameron, open them up. We'll see you back here in a few minutes. So now that you have dug into your sessions a little bit and seen each other's sessions a little bit, let's do our own little closing. We're going to close out the KWL with a quick L. So Cameron, take it away.
All right, so we're going to now go back to our KWL charts. I'm going to make sure that's in the chat. So if you, 1 second, I think I actually hit the wrong link. Yeah, so we're going to go, let's talk about what L actually means. L means what you have learned so far. So sorry, today is all over the place day for Cameron.
I got you, Cameron. I'll put the link in the chat. You go ahead and talk.
Okay, cool. So now we're going to go to look back at the L section. Write something you've learned from today. An example could be Bloom's taxonomy can help me write good objectives. We're going to give you about a minute to write down what you've learned. Hey, Google, stop. Well, that's a good indication. So let's take a look at what people have written in their examples. Specific enough and focused enough so that it can be covered in one session, but all the details and the activities and timing. Make sure that the material is being delivered in an engaging way and uses your time effectively. Scale the objectives so you can scale objectives so they can be achieved in the time allotted. Yes, these are great ideas, great things that you've learned.
All right, keep them coming. I see a lot of good stuff on, keeping your stuff engaging, making sure that you have multiple parts, and just 1 or 2 strategies. Don't overreach. Excellent stuff. So at this point, we are at the end of our first section time together. We're going to hang out and I'm going to show you what we're going to do next. So if you want to stay, we're going to be talking about a much more specific, much more detailed outline of what this lesson plan might look like and something called an internal agenda. It looks like this. And this is what we use in 3CSN and at Pierce College to put our lesson plans together. So if you want to stick around, we're going to look more at that. But if you need to go, I'm just going to paste these links into the chat. So in the links in the chat, you'll see just a couple of things that we would like you to look at. Next week is our last wayfinding for the spring semester, which is crazy. So if you want to come back next week, we're going to be focusing on writing centers and we're going to do a writing center roundtable. So how have we been supporting writing through the pandemic and what does that look like going forward? So please join us or invite your writing center colleagues to join us. It'll be a roundtable discussion, so it'll all be generated through you, no lecture. If you want to do one of these, either a roundtable discussion or a workshop, there's a link in there so for you to sign up to do one of these in fall. And again, if you want to stay until 4:30, we'll talk about what a lesson plan looks like in detail. We just couldn't fit it in an hour. And if you do need to go, make sure you complete that evaluation in the chat. So if you need to go, thank you all so much for being here and hopefully we'll see you next week. And if not, we certainly hope to see you in the fall, hopefully when you're presenting.